Today we're diving into one of the most unexplored regions of Marvel's reality, plunging into the depths of the ocean to explore the lore of a subaquatic warlord. Today is all about Attuma. In Marvel Comics history, Atlanteans are a subspecies of Homo sapiens and are called Homo mermenus. At one time, Atlantis was a beautiful civilization full of prosperity, advanced technology, and magic. And it was an oceanic realm that at one time in its history was hit with a catastrophic cataclysm that sunk all of Atlantis below the surface of the ocean. Then, around 17,000 years ago, Poseidon, the Olympian god of the seas, used his godly power to convert his worshippers into water breathers, creating gills for them and imbuing them with superhuman strength to withstand the crushing power that being at depth can inflict, as well as giving his worshippers sensitive sight, enabling them to see in the murky depths, along with infusing them with a bluish tone of their skin. This subset of beings wandered around before finally casting off their nomadic ways and creating bastions of submerged society around the Atlantic Ocean, from the Arctic all the way down to the Antarctic, centering their society on the ruins of sunken Atlantis. However, some of these Atlanteans, called the Skarka tribe, rejected settlement and instead chose to live as nomads, wandering the ocean floor and branded as barbarians, though they did have their own bases of operation, fortresses that they savagely defended. One of these was a young barbarian named Attuma who was, for some unknown reason, given strength that far surpassed those of his brethren. Attuma was the son of Chief Attakar. As Attuma neared adulthood, he came across a prophecy in the Lost Atlantean Chronicles that told of a conqueror that would take over all of Atlantis by force, and Attuma immediately believed that this prophecy was speaking of him. And then a warlord named Rorik enslaved the tribe, hoping to force the prophecy to fruition to take down Atlantis, but young Attuma was able to rescue his tribe from captivity. Though free, the tribe lacked the resources they once claimed as their own, and driven further down into the chasms that scarred the ocean floor, and the Skarka tribe became known as the Chasm People, now ruled by Attakar, Attuma's father. In the early part of the 20th century, the Atlanteans and Chasm People entered into talks to integrate with each other peacefully. It was in the midst of these talks that the Unforgotten Stone was discovered, a powerful eldritch artifact said to contain the power of Atlantis of old and the old gods themselves. A delegation comprised of Prince Namor, Prince Attuma, and Lady Dorma were sent to recover the lost stone, but it became a disaster when the Atlantean warrior women called Swifttide, along with King Attakar, were killed by the Black Tide. It was then that Attuma formally ascended to the throne of Skarka and became their ruler. The split between Attuma and Namor now is deep and as vast as the chasms his people once roamed. Attuma operated out of Skarka, his fortress city, a city located 200 miles north of Atlantis and 54 miles southwest of the country of Iceland in the North Atlantic Ocean. In Attuma's first comic book appearance, which took place in Fantastic Four issue 33, former Namor lover, Lady Dorma, emerged from the ocean to enlist the Fantastic Four's aid. Namor had returned to his throne in Atlantis, but Attuma and his army was amassing at the gates. Attuma ready to fulfill the prophecy once and for all. It was, as Reed Richards put it, a civil war thousands of fathoms below the surface of the sea. In the midst of the ensuing battle, Lady Dorma professed her ongoing love for the Submariner, but, feeling herself scorned, she betrayed him to Attuma. Being a noblewoman, Lady Dorma was able to order the guard away from an outpost, which allowed Attuma's forces to penetrate Atlantis' defenses and lay siege to the Empire. Before she could watch Namor die, Lady Dorma fled, and that's how she wound up with the Fantastic Four asking them for help. As the FF approached Atlantis in their bathysphere and made contact with Attuma's soldiers, more fighting broke out. The FF were able to breathe underwater, and Human Torch could still make flames because they'd been hyper-oxidized by Reed Richards' Oxospray. This while Attuma continued to assault the main complex with deep-sea tanks and globules of darkness weapons. Namor approached Attuma and challenged him to a hand-to-hand duel, and they fought a mighty battle while the FF worked to undo traps set for Namor by Attuma's army. Namor shattered Attuma's sword before the barbarian revealed the twin disintegrator rays hidden beneath appendages affixed to his helm. Sue Storm was able to make Namor invisible long enough for him to get the upper hand on Attuma and take him down. And with that, Namor banished Attuma from the Golden Realm and right to the murky depths. He was banished, but not gone. Attuma showed up again in Tales to Astonish with issue 64. Janet had just left Hank Pym and jumped on an airplane after they argued. Her plane was caught in a plume of bubbles and epoxy that was emitted from Attuma's undersea ship. Attuma planned to conquer the surface world to regain the honor he'd lost in the fight with Namor. Janet's plane was down, so Attuma dispatched a Robotron droid to see to the crew and passengers. Janet was able to get a message to Hank Pym, who showed up in his giant size and grabbed Attuma and his number 2 to fight them. Ant-Man and the Wasp's constant growing and shrinking caused Attuma to second-guess his ploy and instead promised to not return to the surface world. Then in Tales of Suspense 66, Iron Man encountered Attuma and his forces while testing his new mini-sub for a guy named Senator Byrd. Iron Man swam away from the sub and found a giant undersea cannon that fired nautilum shells, and he recognized Attuma from Ant-Man's description of his ordeal. Attuma wanted to fire his cannon into the upper atmosphere to fuse with the oxygen and make the air so moist it was hard for surface men to breathe, making it easier for Attuma to conquer them. Attuma, though, had to go out and fight with Iron Man and briefly trapped him before Tony managed to escape. Iron Man kamikazed his new mini-sub into Attuma's cannon, destroying it, and then went back to talk to Senator Byrd up on the surface. In Fantastic Four Annual 3, when Dr. Doom learned about Reed Richards and Sue Storm's wedding, he used an emotion weapon to compel supervillains the world over to attack the ceremony. Attuma's submarine surfaced in the waters around the city, and Attuma planned to attack the surface world. They were halted after Daredevil launched a bomb into the Hudson in his own attempt to save the Baxter Building. In the Avengers book, Attuma managed to capture Janet yet again, but that last time she had stayed in her wasp outfit, so Attuma didn't realize it was actually her again. His latest scheme was to use his tidal expander machine to wash the Earth over with waves, and the deluge would allow him to rule the surface world. But then he expanded his vision, vowing to go after Namor, and then the sky, and then the universe. He wanted Jan to bear witness to his rise. The Wasp managed to get a mayday back to Avengers Mansion, and Quicksilver showed up, though Attuma knocked him out. He was captured along with Captain America and Scarlet Witch, and they were all then forced to fight with the mighty Barbarian. When Quicksilver regained consciousness, Hawkeye found him, and together they took the fight to Attuma and freed Cap and Wanda, and all the Avengers battled Attuma and his forces. They also reversed the Tide Machine, and when Attuma went to increase the power after the Avengers escaped, the waves came crashing inwards instead of undulating outwards and destroyed the device with Attuma trapped inside. Then Attuma decided to take a break from the surface and once again invaded Atlantis, again battling with Namor the Submariner. He was pushed back and in the depths outside Atlantis gathered his troops and vowed to take down Namor once and for all. And there he also ended up battling a space robot that fell from the cosmos and sunk beneath the waves. Attuma managed to control the alien servo robot and sent it to attack Atlantis. Invoking Father Neptune, Namor swam up to fight the massive machine, and nothing could stop it until the aliens that first dropped it flew by and took it back. Problem solved. A short while later, Namor's cousin, Lord Byra, used a mind control weapon to trick Atlantis into making him the new ruler of Atlantis, but Namor discovered he was actually working with Warlord Krang and Attuma the Barbarian, two of Namor's deadliest enemies. Namor was exiled until Lady Dorma could destroy Lord Byra's weapon, and when Namor returned, he defeated the trio. That was a crushing defeat for Attuma, and it took nearly a year for him to show up again, and when he did, it was in fall of 1968's Submariner issue 4. By this time, it was Namor who was banished from Atlantis. Lord Seth now ruled, with Lady Dorma ever forlorn by his side. It was word of this that came from Attuma's court jester, Sarusan, which inspired Attuma to capitalize on the Atlantean turmoil to once again attack. But Attuma had his own struggle when Gorgol stood up to challenge Attuma. Attuma managed to blind Gorgol, striking him down with a spiked hammer, and this caused Gorgol to side with Namor, and he snuck Namor right to the feet of Attuma so he could attack and then free Lady Dorma. She took Gorgol to the device that gave Attuma's armor power. Gorgol would succumb to his wounds. With the armor depowered, Namor was able to strike Attuma down. In Subby issue 31, which declared Attuma triumphant, found the barbarian Warlord once more in a battle with Namor. He'd been set up to fight with Stingray and Triton of the Inhumans before Attuma then captured them all. Attuma, before his legions of loyalists, were forced to fight in a combat arena. They escaped, and a guy named Lord Ichthon sabotaged a weapon that Attuma was using, thus causing yet another plan to fail. Much later, as the hordes of Attuma licked their salty wounds outside the gleaming gates of Atlantis, Attuma plotted still, even as the wedding day of Namor and Lady Dorma drew ever closer. That wedding turned out to be a trick, though, as Lady Dorma was revealed to actually be Lyra, Empress of Lemuria, and now Queen of Atlantis, she thought. The real Lady Dorma was captive, but Lyra's plot didn't work and Dorma was still recognized as queen. Then the traitor Ichthor reported this back to Attuma, but was overheard by Namor, and so Namor then had to deal with Ichthon, his terrible drilling machine, stop Attuma's plot, and fight Lady Deep. But he was too late. She died right there in Namor's arms. Later, while Namor was still with the Defenders, an Atlantean came to him while visiting Wong and Clea at Strange's house to say that Attuma was planning to once again strike Atlantic City in a matter of hours. So as Attuma's forces made landfall at the beach, it was up to Namor, the Hulk, Hawkeye, and Valkyrie to stop them. Namor went right for Attuma, who by now Namor knew was partly responsible for Lady Dorma's death. It turns out that Attuma was now working with the Red Ghost, both now controlling porpoises and marine life to do their bidding. After Stubby's series ended, his story was transferred to Giant Size and then the ongoing supervillain team-up series. That book found Namor allied with Doctor Doom. That's when lackeys of Attuma's like Sarasan and Korkan decided to ambush Namor, followed by Dorcas and Tiger Shark. Dr. Dorcas shot Namor right in front of Attuma and they took him away. That's when Dr. Doom decided to step in to aid his ally. Dr. Doom showed up fighting through Attuma's troops, and Doom and Betty Dean Prentice, Namorita's mother, fought their way to where Namor was chained up, and in that fight, Betty died by jumping in front of a blast to save Namor. Namor became enraged and unstoppable, beating on Attuma and Tiger Shark until Dr. Doom teleported them away. They attacked Attuma and his men at Hydra Base. Korkan and Sarasan also died here while Attuma and Tiger Shark were put into the custody of the Terrigen mutated Hydro Men for imprisonment. In Avengers 154, we meet Lord Arno and Tyrak the Treacherous, more allies of Attuma. They managed to capture Vision and bring him before Attuma, who was now calling himself Emperor of Atlantis and Lord of the Seven Seas, even though Namor still sat on the throne. Tyrak managed to take down Cap, Iron Man, Hank Pym, and Scarlet Witch and take them all prisoner. The Beast managed to escape to go get help from the Wizard and Wonder Man. Still bound in their slave collars, Attuma sent the enslaved Avengers to Hydra Base to attack Namor. And while they battled, Attuma planned for his true goal, domination of Earth. Doom was at Hydra Base struggling with Tammy and Namorita when the Avengers burst in and fought with him. And while the Avengers worked on escaping, Furball, Wiz, and Wendy confronted and attacked Lord Arno and Attuma. But then Namor showed up and thought them allied with Attuma, so Namor ended up going to blows with Wonder Man and Wizard, while Beast chased after Attuma. And while all this was happening, Vision went directly to Dr. Doom. Vision was there to suggest they team up to stop Attuma together. Eventually, Subby recognized Wizard from their old World War II Liberty Legion days, and they stopped fighting and shook hands, which is when they all paired up to again defeat the megalomaniac Attuma. In Defenders issue 143, we meet Andromeda, the daughter of Attuma, though she appeared as the human Andrea at first. Attuma had her with Lady Gelva and didn't know about his own daughter until she approached him. Upon learning of this, he was disappointed that not only wasn't she a man, but he was upset that he had her with Lady Gelva and not somebody else. In Avengers 272, found Attuma, the Avengers, and even Alpha Flight caught in battle. The Avengers went undersea to help Namor rescue Marino from Attuma. This was at a time when Namor had abdicated the throne and the people of Atlantis had actually turned on him and supported Attuma instead, making their new quest all the more difficult. When they paired up with Alpha Flight, they managed to free Marina, and it was Monica Rambeau as Captain Marvel who told him Attuma could remain in power as long as his people accepted him, but if he tried anything like that again, they'd respawn. Another time the Avengers went down to Atlantis, coming upon it in a full-scale war with the Lemurians. Grey Hulk and Hercules entered the complex and met with Attuma, and they told Attuma that the war was engineered to bring both races together so they could be sterilized by the High Evolutionary. They also informed him that the High Evolutionary was hiding under the ocean. He wanted to reactivate Krakatoa in order to release his genetic bomb, and that's how they all ended up working together to end the Evolutionary War. During a 1989 event called Atlantis Attacks, deviant High Priest Gower wanted to recreate the Serpent Crown to take over the world. He went to Lyra, Queen of the Lemurians, Warlord Krang, and Attuma to form an alliance. Their first stop was to invade the Panama Canal, but the timing was bad because Namor was there, as well as Iron Man, who was investigating a Hydra ship going through the locks. This is when Andromeda swam down to confront her father Attuma and asked to help foment a rebellion against him. She fought, but was captured by Gower's troops. Beast and Jean Grey later ran into Attuma and his men after they fell into the sea when Gower's tractor beam failed. And then when the Atlantean army surfaced in New York Harbor, Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four responded, and they beat them and the Megasaur back and drove them back out to sea. In Namor the Submariner, Attuma and his troops assaulted a Japanese vessel hunting whales in the Antarctic Ocean. When one of the whales beached itself in Boston Harbor a few months later, Namor was able to hear its thoughts and learned of the strife in the Antarctic, which happened to be near the site of Old Atlantis. So naturally, Namor was compelled to respond to the area, now a veritable hunting ground of human poachers for Attuma and his barbarians. One of the Japanese vessels on whose deck Namor and Attuma fought happened to also have a guy named Sunfire on board. Sunfire stepped in and a three-way fight ensued. Eventually, Attuma retreated, leaving Namor and Sunfire to aid the ship crew who'd gone overboard. Not long after that, Namor ended up working with Attuma and Andromeda to solve the mystery of the wreck of the Endurance. This due to the interference of Sea Leopard, Lyra, and the Lemurians. Attuma then appeared in Hulk's 1998 annual. Atlantis had been manufacturing pharmaceuticals to the surface world, but the byproduct of the efforts produced an illness dubbed the Black Tide, which infected and killed people. This was at the same time that Betty died from radiation poisoning, and Bruce Banner floated out to sea to kill himself, but ended up being captured by those in power in Atlantis, and his DNA harvested for a cure. Then Attuma infused himself with the essence of the Hulk to become a massive hulking monstrosity. Namor and Hulk had to team up to take him down in order to save not only themselves, but all of Atlantis from his wrath. Namor fought him again in 2001 as the Defenders team was coming back together. Attuma then appeared in the Citizen V miniseries, where Attuma's forces had attacked a Russian submarine, so the V Battalion responded. Later, Namor asked the Defenders for help against Attuma, but they were on their own mission, so Subby swam down alone, smashed through Attuma's elite guard, and made his way to Attuma's throne, where Attuma now had Namorita at his feet. Just as Namor was about to choke Attuma out, Doctor Strange teleported him back to the Defenders, and Namor was enraged. However, the team did decide to help Namor defeat Attuma a couple issues later, allowing them all to swim to Atlantis with one of Strange's breathing spells. This time they were met by the newly formed villain group called Deep Six, which comprised of Attuma, Piranha, Orca, Nagala, Sea Urchin, and Tiger Shark. They had a rematch a couple issues later where the Defenders took down Deep Six and Namor managed to take out Attuma, freeing his cousin and their people. In 2001, when King the Conqueror came to Earth and promised war, he also promised that anyone who rose up against present masters and pledged fealty to him would have a place in his new world order, so naturally, Attuma and his barbarian horde came ashore, making their beach assault on Prince Edward Island. Later, Hercules was going through a modern-day version of the 12 Labors, and one of the first was to drive Attuma from Atlantis, a parallel to his original 6th Labor with the Stymphalian birds. Now Attuma was driven onto the coast of Florida, where he made landfall and took over. Then Attuma lost to the Sentry in 2005 when he was beheaded. But during the Dark Reign event, Dr. Doom brought Attuma back to life, head reattached and all. He did this to position himself better against Namor by cultivating allies. He also gave Attuma the strength of Namor, flight, and the ability to breathe on land, and gave Attuma's hordes access to vast amounts of bleeding-edge technology, all in exchange for Attuma's loyalty. During 2011's Fear Itself event, the Breaker of Oceans, Nurkod, possessed Attuma when Attuma picked up the Hammer of Nurkod and transformed him into his most powerful form yet, raising the west coast and attacking its oil lines, battling Namor and again Alpha Flight as he moved up to Canada, managing to destroy New Atlantis in his watery rampage. Around this time, Attuma also fought Speedball and won, flooding St. John's in the process. The Defenders then had to go to New Atlantis to take on Attuma and the Undying Ones, and it took a huge group of Defenders, eventually losing the fight to Namor, who drove Attuma back out to sea. When the Serpent was defeated by Thor, the Hammer of Nurkod was taken from Attuma, and Attuma reverted back to his normal self. After that, Attuma took over Lemuria and sent mythological creatures to attack the surface world's ships and freighters, which prompted S.H.I.E.L.D. to send the indestructible Hulk after him. Attuma had also attacked a submarine version of the helicarrier called Dreadnought. Hulk ended up working with the Lemurian rebel army to fight back against Attuma. Then, as revenge for what Namor did to entire worlds during Secret Wars, the Squadron Supreme destroyed Atlantis, killed Attuma, and beheaded Namor. But that didn't last long, as Nick Fury Jr. was sent to rebuild Atlantis in 2017 to kill a Hydra spy. And on that mission, he had to take out Attuma too. And then we meet Attuma again when pirate ship captain Kate Pryde and her marauders picked up the fugitive champions team to sail them back to the island of Krakoa for safety. They managed to drive Attuma off, and Attuma submerged himself back into the depths, ready to strike again sometime in the future. Whether it's America, Wakanda, Lemuria, Atlantis, we shall see. And with that, that's a wrap on this one, my friends. I'm Jesse, this is JLS Comics, and I'll see you soon.